Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Devil Details, episode 4. We're a podcast dedicated to the Apple TV Plus series Blackbird. I am Sarah.
And I'm Kristin.
And before we get really into anything today, we just wanted to say thank you to everyone who is listening right now and everyone who has listened up until this point. It's amazing. We appreciate you guys so much.
Yes, thank you guys.
Yeah, just thank you for downloading. Thank you for listening. We had no idea how far the show would get and how the response was going to be, and it's just been mind-blowing. The listenership has really gotten behind us, and it's a lot bigger than we thought it was going to be.
And it makes us excited to record each episode for you guys and work behind the scenes on getting some fun guests for you.
Yes,
it's making it really exciting. We look forward to doing it every week. So thank you guys.
I mean, we just set out to do it as just kind of a fun thing. Like Kristin and I were going to watch the show already and going to want to talk about it constantly and bother our friends and family about it. And so instead of doing that, we were doing this podcast and, bothering our friends and family to listen to the podcast instead of having to talk to us about it. But yeah, we just wanted to open up a conversation with other people who are watching the show and just have fun. And it just has turned into this legitimate thing. And we've been able to talk to such amazing people who are involved in the show. Unbelievably amazing people.
Each time it's like, wow, this is for real.
And speaking of amazing guests, we have a huge one for you today. We just hung up the phone with her. She is amazing. We have Natalie Kingston, cinematographer extraordinaire, director of photography for Blackbird, and she came and joined us. So we're going to get into our talk with her a little bit later. But before we get to that, we have to talk about this episode. Ooh. Episode 4.
We thought 3 was intense.
Yeah, it just keeps getting better and better, I think. Yeah. Do you have an episode description?
Yes. Episode 4 is called What's Her Name? And it's in the aftermath of a prison riot, Jimmy and Larry find themselves with time to learn more about each other.
Boy, do they. I love the descriptions. They're so vague. I mean, they don't want to spoil anything because the descriptions are out before the episode comes out. But yeah, so overall, I mean, the show overall is so dense, but this episode was really dense with story and intensity and
a lot of dialogue.
Lots of dialogue. And and I think that really episode 3 and 4 especially have really just brought a lot of stuff to the table.
There's a lot of backstory too, like a lot of
this is a backstory
why they are type of a thing. But we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Before we start our deep dive though, we are missing some people from this episode. There's no Macaulay and Miller scenes in this episode at all. And Ray Liotta doesn't make an appearance in this one either.
It's just Larry and
I really missed I was looking forward to more Greg Kinnear, like one-line zingers that he had, and there was nothing.
But don't forget, we did have Joe Williamson in this episode.
We did. Yeah, and he makes up for it. He has some really good lines in this episode too. It's really it's fun. Oh my goodness, I love watching his character.
Yes. I know you're not supposed to like him, but you do.
You're not supposed to. But we're the presidents of his fan club, right? Of course we like Joe. But no, we love to hate his character.
He's awesome. If you haven't listened to our interview with Joe, it's in episode 3. So make sure you listen to that.
We'll just plug our other episodes. Go back and listen to that one.
Selfish plug.
Yeah. So no Big Jim and Jimmy, although there's some flashback scenes. And so that the presence of Big Jim is here just in the form of Christopher Backus, who plays the young version of Big Jim.
Yes.
And Christopher Backus, fun fact, was in an episode of Mindhunter, which I thought was very cool because Blackbird has kind of been compared to Mindhunter and all like the reviews and how people are receiving it. They're like, if you like Mindhunter, you'll like Blackbird. So that was cool that there's like this direct connection.
Yeah. Oh, he's in Big Little Lies too.
Oh, look at that.
That's where that name sounded familiar and why he looked so familiar.
Yes. Yeah, he did. Yeah. I was like, I know this guy.
Oh, he's been in a lot. Oh, he's been in the OC.
The OC?
Yeah. One episode of the OC.
Yeah. There's a lot of bird imagery in this episode too, which I don't think we've really seen up until this point. But it really is bringing in the whole Blackbird theme.
Yes.
I don't know if I just wasn't paying enough attention to it or if this is like the first time we were seeing a lot of bird stuff.
I don't recall seeing The only thing maybe there was some blackbirds is in the cornfield in the very first episodes,
Oh, maybe.
but I don't remember exactly if there were or not. But this one I definitely remember seeing a
Yeah.
bird in multiple scenes.
Yeah, lots of bird stuff. Yeah, we'll talk about that. And then there's also this episode is so messy and gory. I mean, particularly the one scene.
Yes.
So yeah, do you want to just get right into it?
Let's jump
Start
in.
start talking about it. Right at the beginning, we are in a funeral home, and there's a corpse being prepped for burial.
Yes.
And we don't know we don't know who it is.
Who it is.
And
Because I was
we
like, is this Big Jim? Is
right, is
this
it supposed
Larry's
to be
dad? Is it somebody like that was running through my head.
yeah. But ultimately we figure out it's no one we know.
No.
It's somebody who is just being buried. And then we see they're outside during the burial and there's Robert Hall is standing there and he's dug the grave for this casket.
And it's kind of like lurking in the background, kind
Yeah.
of creepily.
Right. And then he goes and he wakes up young Larry
hmm
and pulls him out of bed. They're going somewhere.
I noted like that scene, it kind of like jumps from him digging the grave to Larry in sleeping in prison and then back to waking him up.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that transition was so smooth
Yeah,
because
it
the
was
music
very
and then the
cool.
music playing when you're looking at current Larry, his face, and the music like
Yeah, and
crescendos right there, and you're
it
like, "Ooh."
also happens because we also see a younger version of Jimmy and of
Mhm.
Big Jim, and Big Jim wakes up Jimmy to go take him to the park to go play football, and it's this really cute,
Yeah.
father-son moment, and they're talking about when Jimmy one day makes it to the NFL, he's gonna buy his dad
Mhm.
a gremlin, even though his
Yeah.
dad wants a Corvette. But then that scene also cuts to Jimmy, and so I
Yes.
think in both of these scenes, it's like they're sort of daydreaming about
Mhm.
going, or well, I guess Larry would be normal night dreaming. I don't know. He's laying in bed, but
Yeah.
they're both flashing back onto these moments in their childhood.
And it kind of shows the difference, like I can never say that word. The difference between kind of Larry's childhood with his dad and the type of childhood Jimmy had with his dad, where this one was so almost wholesome. Like Jimmy had
Yeah,
like the typical, play
at first
catch.
anyway.
Yeah, what you're assuming at this point. And then Larry's is much more,
Dark, and
dark and
there's like some abuse kind of
yeah, there's
going
not
on.
like it's not a wholesome playing catch outside, playing, that kind of stuff. It was more
Yeah,
dark.
and yeah, and we'll keep seeing that kind of go back and forth.
hmm
But after Jimmy's part of that scene, we see Jimmy sneaking into Larry's cell.
It's intense.
Yeah, he's doing like an investigation. He's looking
hmm
around. He kind of inspects the pictures on the wall more closely than he has been able to before. He is looking at like these books that are on his desk, and did you see on his desk there's like these little army figurines, and then there's
Yes.
a jar with
It looked like a
teeth.
heart or a heart. It was, yeah. It looked like a red, like there was something red in it.
Yeah, I think there
And
was
it
like
looked like a heart to
dentures or
me.
something.
Yeah, it was weird.
There was well, I don't know what that was about. I'm like, "Does Larry wear dentures?" I don't remember
I
that.
felt very nervous during that scene. And I don't know if it was the music or the way Taryn was playing it or just not knowing what was coming. But my heart was beating really fast. I have in my
Yeah,
notes,
you
oh
felt
my
like
gosh, hurry
anything
up.
could have happened.
Yeah.
Anything could have happened at that point, and so it was
Like I was yelling at him, like, hurry, hurry.
yeah,
This is not the time to
"Get out
read
of
a
there.
book.
Get out of there." Yeah, he, like, flips through pages of
Yeah.
a book. I'm like, "Do you have time for this, sir?"
I noticed like he was very like cautious the way he took the book out and put it
Yeah.
back.
Yeah, it's so careful to make sure that nothing is, like, out of place. He doesn't
Yeah.
wanna arouse suspicion. He's very thoughtful about that. But we have to talk I mean, he finds this magazine. There's a stack of magazines on the
hmm
floor, and
Like car magazines.
yeah, but he finds this Penthouse magazine, and it's thicker than a
hmm
normal magazine. It's, like, stuffed full with things, and so that makes Jimmy curious, and he opens it
Yes.
up, and there's these disgusting, like, really
Like
violent,
demonic.
crude drawings
hmm
of women, and they're, like, bloodied and no
Yeah.
clothes on, and just, like, horrible hand-drawn
hmm
pictures and
Yeah.
writing.
And then like drawings on magazine
Yeah,
photos, like
and, like,
eyes cut out.
Yeah.
or blacked
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Very, very creepy. Very deep insight into Larry's
Yeah.
character, I think, here, and kind of is making things click for Jimmy in his
Mhm.
head.
And then also while he was doing that, I was like, "Okay, you got the point.
Yeah.
You
You
saw a
know?
couple. You can close it really quickly. Get out, get out, get out."
Yeah. And he just keeps flipping through. And you're like,
Mhm.
this is taking too long. It's building the suspense.
He's gonna show up. He's gonna show up.
Right. Or somebody is.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the next part of this
Yes.
scene where when Jimmy steps out of Larry's cell, he spies somebody in his cell. We have a CO Carter watch.
Fucking guy is the gift that keeps on giving, huh?
Carter is in Jimmy's cell, wondering where he's been. And yeah, like,
Hey, bud.
hey, bud.
Hey, bud.
Oh, God.
But it kind of is startling when you see him in there because you're not expecting somebody to be in there.
Yeah. And Jimmy's freaked out, of
Yeah, like, oh
course.
no, he saw me.
Yeah. And, but yeah, so he talks to Carter, and Carter's like, so there's no money, and nothing's happening. We don't figure out what this emergency was that Carter had at the end of the
No,
last episode.
no.
This guy
And he
is
still
totally a
has
mystery.
the bruise on his face.
Yeah,
Just
it's
no Band-Aids.
he's not bandaged up, but he's still kind of roughed up. And God, this scene, like when he tells Jimmy to come into the cell, and he's like, "Oh, sorry for blocking your door," and he
Yeah.
doesn't actually get out of the way.
Yeah.
He just kind of steps to the side and gives Jimmy a sliver of an
Yeah.
opening to get in the cell, and then shuts them both in the cell together.
Yeah. That made me nervous.
Yeah, I mean, he's really taking this like sort of power trip. Like,
Yeah.
I have this power over this guy.
And you can feel the tensions. You can definitely feel the tension, but you can feel like the claustrophobicness of it all.
Yeah,
Like when you hear our conversation with Natalie, you'll kind of hear about this, but how it feels like you're in the cell with them.
right. And
And
it's
so you feel
very.
like you're in this tight space with them.
And it gives this feeling of like being trapped, which is
Mm-hmm.
what jail does. You
Mm-hmm.
feel trapped, you're imprisoned, and that really that claustrophobic feeling.
Yeah.
And Carter is using that to his advantage for
Yes.
sure.
Oh, yeah. But it almost comes across as kind of nice. Like, I mean, he's not, I mean, he's using a power trip, but it's not like he didn't hit him or,
Well, he did though.
yeah.
At the end, when he is
Yes.
walking out, he slaps Jimmy's arm real hard.
Yeah.
Like,
But
but
it
I
wasn't
mean,
like brutal. It wasn't like
yeah.
it was
And
almost like, well, if I believe you, I guess I have to
yeah,
type of a thing.
and you wonder. I'm so Carter is such a mystery to me still, and I'm wondering how the rest of this show is going to play out with him, because he does it seems almost like he's just letting it go, like, oh, I can't get anything from you, I
Right.
guess that's it. But I
Yeah.
mean, he's
There's
still
still something
there's something like he's going to get
scheming.
vindictive, or
Yeah.
something's going to happen there. It
There's
can't just
definitely
not
like a
resolve.
scheme.
But yeah, he just walks away like it's,
Yeah.
I guess that's that.
Not without raising his eyebrows in a very funny manner.
The eyebrow raise, yeah, from the
Yes.
trailer.
Yes.
That's what first got us suspicious of Carter in the
Yes.
first place, was this look, this eyebrow raise,
Mhm.
the eyebrow thing.
Yeah, that was a good one.
So yeah, still on Carter watch. This
Yes.
guy's still a mystery. We're still wondering what's going on with how that's all going to play out with Jimmy and Carter. Then Larry's back,
Mhm.
and this is a big sort of one-on-one scene with Larry and
Yes.
Jimmy. They're standing outside their cells and talking about how quiet it is. Larry calls it the
Yes.
riot quiet,
Yes. It's
the
like the
calm
calm
before the
before the
storm.
storm. Oh, that was funny.
Yes. It's this like ominous warning. Like
Mhm.
Larry knows that something's about to happen.
Yes.
But first he's getting suspicious of Jimmy now.
Yeah,
This is
it
the
was
first little moment where he's like,
mhm.
what is Jimmy's deal, and why is he so interested in me? And he starts
Did you see
questioning
somebody
Jimmy.
in my space? Or and then Jimmy's like, "Well, is something missing? Why would it be
Yeah,
missing?"
right. There's a quick flashback sequence in this part where we see young Larry and
Mhm.
his father at night, and they're going back to this fresh grave that
Mhm.
his father had dug earlier, and Larry starts digging it out again. But this is when Larry says that line from the trailer.
Why are you looking at me like that? I'm not looking at you anyway. Like you know me.
Yes.
And Jimmy's response.
Larry, what the fuck?
First of all, it's about time someone said that.
Yes.
What the fuck,
Yes.
Larry?
Yeah. Like, duh, I know you.
What the fuck? It's a great line delivery.
There were some good lines in this one.
I was laughing at some points.
Yeah. Some I probably shouldn't have been laughing, but they made me chuckle.
Right. It's an uncomfortable laugh at times, but
Yes.
there's some fun moments. And Larry's on to Jimmy. He's like, "Why
Yeah.
are you asking me so many questions?" And Jimmy just kind of storms off. He's like, "I'm not
Yeah.
doing this with
I
you. What are you?"
liked when Larry says, "You're asking me. All you do is ask questions." And Jimmy asks another question, and he goes, "There you
Yeah.
go again."
That's a question.
That's a question.
Yeah.
Paul was like brilliantly creepy in that
So
moment.
creepy.
Like,
He like when he talks, he like gasps in between words and like in awkward moments that just kind
yeah.
of add to this creepiness.
And then like he doesn't make eye contact, so it makes it even more creepy. And then when
Yeah.
he does that whisper talk,
Yeah, just
so that you
barely
can't
above a
really,
whisper.
you have to really listen to him. And then when he's leaning against the cell wall and he's talking and he just kind of puts his face into the wall, I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah, just crazy, like weird.
give him all of the awards.
Yeah. But yeah, Larry follows Jimmy out into the yard and
Yes.
they are talking and Larry sort of says how he gets paranoid sometimes. But then he starts talking again about how something's about to happen. There's a vibe through the prison
Yeah.
and Larry's like there's something bad's going to happen. And I think at this point also Theo Carter is in the guard tower.
They don't show him, but I'm pretty sure that
I
was
think
him
it's
up there.
him. It's a very far away shot, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
that's him up in the tower there, which makes sense because after the whole riot, Carter gets off unscathed. Nothing
Yes.
happens to him, so I think being up in that tower probably saved him from that.
Yes.
But yeah, so Larry rightfully predicts this huge prison riot that breaks out. It is brutal.
I gasped and then I don't think I breathed the entire, I don't even know how long it was because I was so glued to the screen.
Yeah. So much happens. It's wild.
It's hard to keep up.
Yeah, people are getting stabbed. People are getting their throats cut
Yeah.
and guards
And, like,
are getting beaten
guards, yeah.
yeah, they're like dumping food and water, like boiling water onto
yeah.
people. It's wild.
Throwing TVs.
Throwing TVs, throwing someone out of their wheelchair
Yeah.
and like breaking the wheelchair.
Yeah.
At one point there's like in the hallway there's like some gas or something and
Yeah.
people are
Something leaks.
yeah, so they can't breathe. Everyone's like covering their faces
Yeah.
because there's some gas leak or something that's happening. And I mean, people are breaking the lights and
Yeah, it's
wild.
And then people are like bleeding from their abdomen and like running through the hallway.
Yeah, and bleeding through from the mouth, and there's just like bodies everywhere.
Yeah.
Once
And you don't know who's an inmate and who's a guard, and
yeah, everyone got hit.
But it was beautifully shot.
It was wild, and it almost seems like it wrapped up as soon as it started too. Like you were in it, and it felt like a long time, and then once it was over, it felt like it didn't.
Yeah,
it was over. It didn't happen almost. And Jimmy and Larry got off.
Cuts to them in their cell.
Yeah, they're unscathed and nothing happened to them. It was funny when Larry was going back to his cell, like someone kind of run by him and he gave this little like yelp noise. I was like, ah!
Yeah. Like, how did they escape that?
I know nothing happened
I guess
to them.
they were outside.
Maybe.
Maybe we assume that they stayed out in the yard during that. And so it happened with others that were inside.
Right.
I don't know.
But everyone's screaming for a lockdown and they're in their cells. And the end of the riot, there's like these still shots that they show of like the mess and the blood and everything everywhere. There's food everywhere. There's like just all kinds of junk and broken stuff and bodies, people like twitching from being stabbed. Craziness.
And the music during it, just was... I can't... This episode, the music was like top notch the whole time.
Yeah. The music in this series is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
So when Larry and Jimmy end up back in their cells for the lockdown after this riot, they get to talking to each other, and Larry wants to confirm that they're still friends after
Yes.
their like little spat where Jimmy stormed off, and Jimmy sort of almost reluctantly agrees to be friends
Yeah.
again, but it doesn't come across that way to Larry necessarily, but on his face you can kind of tell, like,
Yeah.
I mean, I have to be friends with this guy, so I guess so.
But you can kind of hear, too, the desperation in Larry's voice of him desperately wanting a friend. Like,
Yeah.
he's craving that type of relationship.
Yeah, he absolutely wants to be friends with Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says that he takes care of his friends, and that
Yes.
just cues this creepy serial killer laugh.
Uh-huh. Like, lays
Stereotypical.
back.
Yeah. And yeah, so Larry and Jimmy and some other inmates and some guards, we see CO Holt and CO Carter stroll into this very messy mess hall.
Yes.
Everything is a disaster in here. And Larry sort of takes charge and sends these guys to work. Well, first he asks for hoses.
Yes.
And that, like, CO Carter, he I can't remember what he said exactly, but virtually he was just like, fuck, no, you can't have hoses.
You're not getting a hose.
Yeah, work with what you got.
Yeah, but I like that Larry kind of took ownership of the cleaning. Like, it was his leadership role, and he was a totally different person during that moment because, like, he was confident, he spoke clearer, he was, telling people where to go and what they needed to do, and it was a total opposite of what he is all the other times. So that was interesting. Like, that was his comfort.
Yeah, he's in his element here. And then there's this kind of funny, like, fast forward scene of them, like, cleaning up and picking things up, and Larry sort of there's like a voiceover of him giving them instructions, like,
hey guys, he says at one point, gentlemen, there's some cups at the front.
Yeah. he's really owning this, like, little bit of leadership that's been afforded to him. Then comes some more one-on-one stuff between Jimmy and Larry while they're cleaning, and there's this very interesting spray bottle choreography that's going on.
Right before that was he said we need putty knives.
Oh yeah,
we need putty knives.
They ain't giving us putty knives.
They wouldn't give us hoses. You think they're gonna give us knives?
Right.
No way, man.
But the way he says it was like, we need putty knives. Like, obviously we need those.
Obviously we need putty knives. Yes. They ain't giving us no putty knives. I think Taryn's accent in this episode almost dropped into, like, a New York accent a little bit. There was, like, New York and Chicago mixed together.
Which they could kind of blend a little bit.
Yeah. It felt very New York on this one.
Yes.
It's like, they ain't giving us no putty knives.
Yeah. And neither one of them have ever used a spray bottle before.
No,
I feel like.
Clearly not.
I don't know if that was because they were pretending or they just have never had to use one because it was very awkward.
Right. And they're spraying random things, and they're squeezing it like 30 times, like short little squeezes.
And not even on the table. They're just like spraying it in the air.
Yeah. Like, this is not how cleaning works.
No.
And they're just kind of, like, sitting there, and then while they're talking, they'll just spray, like, the side of the table randomly. It's
just
very
letting
interesting.
it sit. Clearly, neither of them have ever deep cleaned anything.
Do they even know what these chemicals do?
Yeah.
Larry's supposed to be a pro cleaner. What's going on?
Yeah.
But so they start talking about their childhood, kind of, and sharing about how, like, Larry talks about how Wabash was this innocent place, and I loved how he says that there was no weed at his high school. Like, Jimmy said that he sold weed to make money in high school, which is true. That's what Jimmy did. That's how he first got into selling drugs, and then he realized that cocaine could get him a hell of a lot more money. But and Jimmy tells Larry, like, you went to high school in America? Yeah, there was weed there, I promise.
But I like that it showed Larry's being naive, and because I was that kid in high school, like, I mean, I knew that happened, but I wasn't really around it.
Yeah.
So, you kind of are blind to that.
Mm-hmm. I liked the comment that Wabash was like the town where Opie lived,
Yes.
which for those people who are under the age of 50,
Yes.
Opie is, we're not over the age of 50, but
No.
I know what Opie is. He was
There
a
used to be a
character.
thing called TV Land, Nick at Night, where they
Yes.
used to
So
replay these a lot.
Opie's a character in a show from the 60s, I think the Andy Griffith show was.
Probably the 60s.
Yeah. Um
Ron Howard.
yeah, Ron Howard. And Opie's just like kind of this innocent little boy, and
Mhm.
the it's interesting that they mentioned Opie because it's a very like father-son dynamic in that
Yes.
show, and it's like a very pure one too.
It's very wholesome. It's very, which most shows were back then, but it was
Hmm.
very, Main Street type,
Yeah.
which is what Larry was kind of describing, that, wholesome town that he grew up in.
Yeah, with candy stores and malt
Hmm.
shops and
Yeah.
60s vibes,
Yeah.
even though
And
he
when he
grew up in
says,
the 70s.
yeah.
Um,
Is this when he says, "What a world it was, James? What a world it
yes.
was"?
I like when he refers to him as
Yeah.
James rather than Jimmy.
Yeah. This whole episode he says James.
Yeah, and I think that's reflective of how it was in the book too.
Hmm.
Whenever Larry was quoted in the book, he would say James,
Yeah.
for the most part. And during this whole thing, we're seeing some more flashbacks.
Hmm.
When Larry tells Jimmy that he worked in a cemetery, or not worked in a cemetery, but lived and worked in a cemetery, and there's a flashback to more of young Larry digging
Hmm.
this grave, and he's crying even in this point. And
Yes.
I really love the way that they handled flashbacks in this show,
Hmm.
because it's not like a typical like narration
Right.
over a flashback. It's not specifically Larry telling Jimmy about these moments that happen. It's just kind of them sharing about what they remember about how
Yeah.
they feel, and then we see the specific moments that are happening, and it doesn't actually match up exactly to how they're talking, and
Right.
it's I don't think it's your typical back and forth flashback
No.
moments from a lot of shows.
No, it was very, and the transitions were very smooth and kind of just painted the picture of what they were
Mhm.
talking about more.
Yeah. And then Jimmy talks about his dad being his
Hmm.
best friend. So this is another example. It cuts to a younger version of Jimmy, but it's not Jimmy and his dad being best friends. It's
Right.
Jimmy waiting for his dad to come home after leaving for
Hmm.
work and not seeing him, and time is going by, and
Hearing his parents fighting and.
yeah, he's like sitting on the stoop
Hmm.
outside his house, and his parents are screaming and fighting at each other, and just Jimmy's kind of sitting there looking all sad, and his
Yeah.
dad storms out past him, doesn't acknowledge him. So that's almost the opposite of what Jimmy was
Hmm.
saying.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting how, because you weren't sure if he was remembering it differently or if he was trying to relate to Larry
Yeah.
by telling him a little more.
And that's kind of how the whole scene is going.
Yeah.
I think it's a combination of both these things.
Hmm.
It's Jimmy sort of opening up, but also trying to connect.
Yes.
And yeah, so Jimmy starts talking about football and how he's the best his school had seen in 15 years, and Larry tells Jimmy that he reminds him of his brother a lot.
Yeah.
And but then something kind of
Clicks.
clicks in his head that maybe he should try and relate more to Larry
Yeah.
specifically.
I have that down. He's, as a note, I said he realizes that he needs to relate more to Larry and not Gary.
Yeah, so he kind of downplays his football
Hmm.
career after that. He's like, "Oh, actually I was just second string.
Yeah.
I didn't play, and I lied about it." And he tells Larry that it's just kind of something that guys do to impress other guys.
Yeah.
He was just trying to.
To make him seem bigger than he actually was, and
Yeah.
which I think Larry related to. Like, it made
Hmm.
Larry feel more willing to talk because he was like, oh, well, if everybody's lying to me about how great everybody is, maybe more people are like me and I can talk more about it.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Was this when he said it makes my gums ache?
Yes, that's another good line.
Yeah.
Sometimes you remind me so much of Gary, my gums ache.
And then Larry kind of asks Jimmy out of the blue, could you eat a pet chicken?
It was so random.
Yeah. And Jimmy's like, why would you, first of all, why would
Who
you
has
even
a pet
have a pet
chicken?
chicken?
Right.
That's not a thing that people have.
People probably do have pet chickens.
They do. It's a thing.
Yeah.
Jimmy is not convinced.
No. But maybe he meant like if you have a pet chicken, it's not going to be food.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to ever be put in that situation where you need to make the decision. Like if you have a cow and it's a pet cow, it's not going to be dinner. But if you just have cows, it could be dinner. Like it's not a pet cow that you're going to eat.
Yeah. But Larry, it's all the same to him. Larry's like,
Right.
we're all meat, which
Yes.
is a serial killer line. Absolutely.
Right.
But it's all meat. I would eat my pet dog, he says. And when he says we're all just meat, and he grabs his arm and we're all just meat, which is terrifying. I didn't realize that there was some cannibalism vibes happening.
Yeah. When Jimmy asks, well, have you ate your pet dog before?
Right. And so they start, they're kind of joking, and Larry says, well, people eat fish. What's the difference between eating fish and eating a dog? And Jimmy says, nobody plates a puppy.
And Larry thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, they're like giggling together. And then C.O. Carter, who this entire time, through this whole scene, Carter is constantly behind Jimmy. And I don't know if I was like just hyper focused on C.O. Carter because that's who I am now.
Right.
But he's lurking behind Jimmy and definitely looking at him specifically, just always watching.
Paying attention, yes.
Yeah, always keeping his eye on Jimmy, which, I mean, it's his job. He's the CEO.
Right.
But there's a lot of inmates in here. He doesn't need to stare down Jimmy this entire time.
But I like that he yells out, convicts, this isn't a date.
Yeah, stop fucking goofing off.
But it was funny because I was laughing, and so was my sister during that plate a puppy thing. And as soon as he yelled that, we both stopped laughing immediately. Like we were being yelled at.
Like C.O. Carter's yelling at you.
Yes.
Hey, Kristin, this isn't a date.
Hey, convicts. This isn't a date. Do your job and stop fucking goofing off.
Oh, sorry. And there's more flashbacks. There's a lot of flashbacks during the sequence. It's a very long scene. But young Larry is in the opening of the grave. The coffin's open, and he's taking off these valuable items off his body. Yeah. Anything that could be worth money. The shiny, fancy stuff.
Yeah.
And this is the first time we see a bird. Yes. There's a bird in the tree sort of watching down. And
it startled me. Moved.
And Larry looks up at it. Young Larry.
Yes.
We'll try and specify. Young Larry.
Which, by the way, the casting for young Larry was so good.
Yeah.
He looks just like Paul.
He does. He looks like him, and he's such a good actor, and he really plays the part really well. It was really fun watching him. And really like watching the start of a serial killer.
Yeah.
He
played it so well for not really having, I don't think he spoke much.
Not at first. I mean, we haven't seen him speak really at all. Yeah.
Yeah, but just again, acting with his eyes and his mannerisms, he did for being so young. I don't know how young he is in real life, but I assume under the age of 12-ish.
And so after that, Larry is telling Jimmy about how he started digging graves when he was 14, but he was digging them up before that.
Yes.
So the difference there being, he basically told Jimmy that he robbed graves when he was a kid.
I like that he described like the cat door stop, or why do you need a door stop?
Right, a solid gold Siamese cat thing. Like, you don't need that in the afterlife.
Right.
With your body decomposing underground. I mean, it's kind of a fair point, but also don't rob graves.
Yeah,
it's a symbolic thing a lot of times when people are buried with things. This is when I clocked a tear in hair watch also.
Yep, I did too.
Good. I'm glad.
I have it in my notes.
So his hair in this scene, it's after they're kind of almost done cleaning, I think, at this point.
They're like mopping?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the final thing that you do.
Also, they've never mopped before in their life.
Yeah. The cleaning.
I've never mopped up after a riot, so maybe it's different, but
I think mopping is generally the same.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe they were digging into like bloody spots that were really stuck in or something, but they were kind of like jamming them up and like squishing it around.
It wasn't they don't have they need to keep their day jobs.
They do a good job at acting.
Yes.
But yeah, Taryn's hair, it's kind of messy.
Parted on the side instead of slicked back.
Yeah. It's kind of falling forward. And I think it's just to show that it's been a long day and they've been working hard and cleaning, but it's different.
It's
different.
It looked more real.
Yeah.
Like his actual hair. Obviously,
yeah,
it's longer.
Does he have hair gel in this prison? It's always very finely taken care of.
Yeah, I don't know if he uses, like, if you can buy hair gel.
Yeah, he might be able to get it in, like, the commissary.
Yeah. I don't know if that's something that they can get. But his hair looked more, well, it had no product in it in this scene, but it definitely looked, I don't know, it was hard to tell because it looked more real in this scene, but it also looked lighter. Maybe it's because there was no gel in it.
Maybe.
And maybe that gel just makes it so much darker.
And he hasn't had time to look in the mirror and fix it.
Yeah, fix it.
Like he probably normally does.
Yeah. It was kind of floppy and fluffy.
Yeah. And at this point, Larry is full on like talking like a serial killer.
Yeah.
He is saying that dead people are pleasant to be around. He says no matter who you are when you're alive, death evens everything out.
And he said something like it kind of gives him hope.
Yeah, like, hope that the afterlife is
better
something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Which we've seen the symbolism. There's like a cross hanging on Larry's wall. He's very religious, which is a true thing.
Yes.
That at least on the outside, it seemed like Larry Hall was a religious person and believed in God and all that. And this part is very disturbing, I think. Yeah. I was kind of taken by it because he's talking about this girl who he knew in high school, and she
had it all.
Yeah. She had it all. She had a lot of potential, and she went to college and ended up dying by like she had an accident. She jumped off of a building where she was doing these like roof jumping. Yeah. And she fell between two buildings and broke her neck. And yeah, it was very disturbing the way that Larry was talking about it. Like he was kind of getting a kick out of it.
Yeah.
Almost,
like he was, or like that he enjoyed happy. That part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
almost like vindictive.
Something like that. And it shows a younger Larry, not like when he was a kid, but when he was like a young adult. So he didn't have his burn sides. Yeah. He just had a mustache, and he was burying this casket that was, I guess, representing this young woman. And it was very disturbing. I was kind of skeeved out by the whole thing.
Yeah, it was. Those are the scenes where they're so intense that it's difficult to watch, but you can't stop watching.
Yeah, I mean, mostly just the dialogue at that point. Yeah. But then it also cuts to young Larry again having to cut off the corpse's finger to get the wedding ring off. So just all of that was happening all together. So it was really...
the noise, like the sounds.
Oh, I did not like that.
I had to kind of look away.
Right. It didn't actually show anything until the finger was already off.
Yeah.
It was...
You could hear it, and that was enough for me. It was...
Yeah. It was disturbing.
That mixed in with the words and everything going on was just a lot.
Yeah. It was rough. And then and Larry's dad is kicking dirt on him too at this point. And so Larry's flat out not having a good time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now the mess hall is clean. They're eating food. They're eating probably dinner, as it's probably taken them all day to do this. Larry is eating bread in a semi-normal way this time.
Oh, not completely.
Not completely, but
kind of less in the middle and more on the side.
He doesn't take a bite out of just a plain piece of bread in the middle of it. But they are also eating green apples.
Yes.
Green apples are hugely symbolic in media. And I think about green apples every time I see a green apple. It makes me think, because it's definitely a deliberate choice to have them eating green apples in this scene. And I look out for green apples in movies and other forms of art. You see them. The biggest example that I can come up with off the top of my head was Draco Malfoy in Harry Potter, the third one. He's eating a green apple. Also in Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Barbossa eats green apples. And then in Deadpool, the main antagonist in Deadpool, Ajax or Francis, he eats a green apple. And so it's a big thing. It's a very deliberate sort of movie trope that happens a lot. And a lot of times it's the villains in things that are eating green apples.
You just said that, yeah. Because if you even watch old Disney movies, all the villains have green around them at some point.
Yeah.
Like I've read that before, that all villains have like a green aura almost.
Right. Yeah. And apples in Disney are a thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can talk about that too. But and it's they're used to display a sense of like confidence and arrogance, which is why a lot of villains are doing it. And the sound of someone eating an apple, it's such a distinct sound,
Mhm.
and it's meant to draw attention to that character. So they they want that attention. And also, on top of that, green apples also represent like children, or like succession and
Mhm.
children, and following in parents' footsteps, because it's like the apple doesn't fall far from
Right.
the tree, that kind of thing. And the green color represents like a youthfulness and innocence in that respect.
Hmm.
So like on the other side of that, like if you see a red apple, it's usually symbolizing like sex, or if you think about like the Adam and Eve story, like the original
Right.
sin, that's what a red apple would represent. Like, for
Interesting.
example, in Snow White, or
Right.
even in Twilight, there's like red apple references, but they're eating green apples in Blackbird. Both Larry and Jimmy are eating a green apple. And and also green apples are like more sour
Mhm.
apple, and so it's usually the dirtier, more sour characters that are eating
Oh,
them. So
interesting. And they were taking like serious, but they weren't doing TV bites of those
yeah,
apples.
they
They
were
were,
going to town on these
yeah,
apples. So
hardcore eating
it's
them.
definitely deliberate, and I think it mainly with these guys. I mean, neither of them are very, for like straightforward good
Right.
guys, of course. But I think it really speaks to the daddy issues of the whole thing,
Mhm.
and that's what a lot of this episode is showing us is their relationship with their fathers.
Mhm.
So yeah, it has to be deliberate.
Yeah, I would assume. We should have asked Natalie about it.
Yeah, we should have. I didn't think about that. But yeah, it gives off these vibes. And even if you are not actually aware of how symbolic a green apple is,
Mhm.
when you see somebody eating a green apple in movies, it automatically gives off those vibes because it's
Yeah.
such a movie trope and it happens so
Mhm.
often in media. So yeah, that's my tangent about green apples. Also, it's on Apple TV. So
Oh,
they're just like subliminally
yeah.
messaging their
Product
streaming service
placement.
on their own show. Apple TV, green apples. Anyway,
It did make me want a green apple though when I was watching it.
I love green apples.
So do
Does
I.
that speak to our issues? I don't know.
Maybe. Because I think I even said while watching it, ooh, I would love a green apple with peanut butter.
A nice crisp green apple
Uh-huh.
sounds delicious. Anyway, so while they're eating these green apples and crunching, and
They're talking about Jimmy's mom.
yes, and Larry asks, "What does your mommy work?" The mommy thing.
Yes, I like
And
the it's
Jimmy
like
corrects him.
my mother.
My mother works in a bar.
Yeah.
And yeah, talks about how she works odd hours
Yes.
and how his dad didn't really like that. And Larry asks if it's because she's fucking people at the
Right.
bar. And the line
It's
delivery,
very blunt.
yeah, from Jimmy.
You fucking beg your pardon?
Right.
It's so good. Like, what did you just say about my
Right.
mother? I mean, it's true, but don't
Right.
say it.
Only I'm allowed to say that stuff.
Yeah.
I did notice, like, when he's telling, at this point, he starts telling the story of his mom and dad, and he's looking off into the distance, like he's reminiscing about it, but also trying to figure out what he should say to relate to Larry, because he
Yeah.
knows he's got to tell this story, but he can't necessarily tell it 100% factual because he needs to relate it somehow to Larry. So you can tell he's looking off into the distance
Yeah, he tries to be
to figure it
really,
out.
really thoughtful. And at this point, Larry asks him to tell him something true.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if Larry was just kind of picking up on the fact that Jimmy was trying to be really careful about
Right.
what he was saying. He's like, tell me the truth. Like, you're
Right.
telling stories at this point, which there might be some truth to them. But I think, it speaks to how smart Larry is.
Right. Well, I think it kind of hit home more to Jimmy, like, okay, I need to step up my game. I'm not just talking. I have to actually, like, be honest, but be honest enough that he can relate to it. Like, don't be 100% truthful,
But
but he has to
really
be
try and
deliberate in what he says and how he says it.
yeah. And Larry's suspicious of Jimmy. It's more of him being suspicious, and that keeps going through this episode.
Yes.
And when Larry does say that, Jimmy's breath is kind of like he's like he's shaking, and he's nervous.
Yeah.
He's like, okay, I really, yeah, like you said, like you really need to
Play the game.
yeah. And so he starts opening up about his mom's boyfriend, Glenn. Glenn, he says it with disgust.
Yeah.
Who's abusive to him and his brother and his mother, and Jimmy talks about needing to get old enough and strong enough to defend his mother from this guy.
He's taken karate and all of these,
he kind of
working out.
He takes it on himself, or at least that's what he's telling Larry that he is doing. It's his choice. He's taking it on himself. And when he does feel like he's finally old enough,
he's like 14.
Yeah, 14 years old. He takes an opportunity. Glenn hits his mother, and Jimmy jumps in, but he gets beaten badly.
And Larry actually even says, like, did you beat him? Like, did you take him?
Jimmy's like, no. He paints the kitchen with me or something that he says. Yeah, so he ends up with...
seeing Larry's face at that point, like, oh, Jimmy's not this, godlike person.
Yeah,
like,
he's not this perfect superhero guy. But he was a kid.
I think it kind of helps relate Larry more to Jimmy.
Yeah. And then they talk about how his mom and Glenn would have sex on the other side of the wall. And like, I can keep talking about it constantly, but the way that Taryn portrayed this like emotion in the scene, and how he was like, it really hurt him. And just thinking back on it was painful.
Yeah. You could see it in his eyes. Like,
Yeah.
and you could see the pain, like, trying to remember it, but also the pain in realizing, like, that Larry's getting joy out of hearing this type of a thing. Like,
yeah,
he's the realization of how deep and dark Larry is you can feel that on Taryn's face as he's acting.
And I think part of it is like Jimmy is realizing how much he can actually relate to Larry, which is disturbing enough on its own. And Larry even kind of pushes it more, because Jimmy's talking about how he got beat up and his nose is broken, his ribs are broken, and Larry says that wasn't what hurt.
And Jimmy's like, well, yeah, it did hurt. But
It did hurt. But yeah, just the pain conveyed on Jimmy's face in this scene was...
Yeah. And then Larry, like, realizing, like, no, that's not why you were so upset. You were so upset because it hurt your heart.
Right.
This is your mom. And
and then and then it cuts to like a teenage Jimmy and his mom talking in his room, and Jimmy's, all bloodied up, and his mom tells him that he got what he was asking for. And that she wants him to try again.
Right.
When he's ready. And he's so hurt and sad. It's this is another scene that really like emotionally it's
tough.
a lot. So teenage Jimmy is played by Braxton Alexander, and then his mom is played by Kylie Cassiano Davis, and they're really good. Really good. The scene was so good. I'm really like thinking back on it, like
And then is this when Larry starts saying, like, did you want to kill her or did you want to hurt her?
So they're like in this hallway. I don't know if they're cleaning in the hallway or
putting stuff away, maybe.
And they end up talking about how Jimmy wanted to kill his mom at some points, and it leads to talking about women in general and how Larry tells Jimmy again, he's being very open, even though he's being suspicious of Jimmy. He's telling him all these things, and he tells Jimmy literally that he keeps starter fluid in his van to knock out women and strangle them so that they'll stop hitting him.
Yeah.
Which is another disturbing.
And he says they, and Jimmy's like, who's they? Because like I think Jimmy's like, is there more than one? Like, let me try to get this out of him.
Yeah, because ultimately his goal is supposed to be learning where a body is buried.
Mm-hmm.
So pushing to him talking specifically about somebody is a good step, but he doesn't get specific.
No, he just, when he says who's they, he just says women.
Just
and then to get them to stop screaming or hitting.
So they stop hitting him.
And you can tell that Jimmy's having a hard time hearing this. Like, I mean, I had a hard time hearing it. But
it's hard to even talk about, really. I'm having a hard time talking about it.
Like, my notes actually stopped kind of there because it was so like deep.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
After that point, though, Larry asks Jimmy what he does with the girls that he meets.
Yeah.
So it cuts back to Jimmy in a bar with Rochelle again, like in the first episode. And this is where it really clicks, where Jimmy basically dates his mom. Like this Rochelle woman looks very similar to what his mom looks like. You know, just like this dark-haired Italian-looking girl.
And it's also flashing a bunch of girls.
Yeah, and they all kind of have similar features.
Yes. It's very 80s too.
Yes.
Like even his blue vest thing, and
it's a good look though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, but his hair. Yeah.
Even the women hair. I mean, if you lived in the 80s and early 90s, that's what it looked like.
And so we flash back to another Darren's emotionless face while he's having sex with Rochelle on the couch the night before his house gets raided.
Yeah.
So it's another flash of that scene. I
do have to say, to bring some levity to it, I love when he has eye crinkles. So when he smiles so much, he gets like the little crow's feet. I call them eye crinkles around his eyes. And he makes a smile in the bar scene where he has eye crinkles, and it made me smile.
We love Darren's face and the things that it does.
To bring a little bit of levity to the deep scenes that were happening. Right. Yeah, it was nice.
This episode is so heavy.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, after all this talking, Jimmy and Larry are back in their cells. Jimmy's doing some push-ups. He probably didn't get a lot of time to get some workouts in today, so he's doing push-ups in his cell and
has his feet in the toilet, which is gross.
Yeah, great.
I know he's in jail, and it doesn't matter, but
yeah, he doesn't have a choice. That's the angle that he can do push-ups in, so he has to put his feet up there.
Kudos for being able to do that, because he held that plank for a really long time.
Right, because Larry's talking to him, and he tells him, like, hey, today was a really fun day, which is wild. A wild thing to say about this day. But to Larry, he bonded with his friend, so it was fun for him. And he got to do a bunch of cleaning, which is in his element.
But I wonder if he held that plank that whole time. Because that was hard. I mean, if you've ever held a plank for a very long time, that's...
Yeah. With your feet up especially, too, that's even harder.
Yeah, because all your weight's on your shoulders and hands.
Yeah.
Probably not what I was supposed to be focused on, but...
Listen, we are focusing on the entirety of the show. Every aspect of it.
Brilliant acting.
So we cut back to young Larry in the graveyard climbing out after having gathered all of these items. And this is more bird stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Larry asks about the birds that have been lurking kind of throughout this whole night. And his dad tells him that they're falcons.
Yeah.
And that falcons watch over the dead.
It's the blackbird.
That's the blackbird, is a falcon. This is the falcon's tail, is what this is.
But I wonder if that's the symbolism.
Yeah, definitely part of it.
Yeah.
And young Larry jumps back into the grave and finds the finger that he just cut off of this corpse and is like disgustingly excited about it.
Yeah, it was gross.
It's a young serial killer laugh again too.
Yes.
Little chuckle. And then the last scene. Here's the thing about the last scene. Gary is visiting Larry in prison. His twin brother is visiting him. And do you remember what they talked about or anything about this scene? Because I was too busy looking at Jake McLaughlin.
His eyes, so beautiful.
Yeah, like unnaturally handsome, this guy.
Yeah, and they were like sparkly. And
Yes.
I don't know if it's because it was in such contrast to Larry's eyes being almost closed so that you couldn't really see. I don't know if the lighting, Natalie lit the scene beautifully.
Yeah.
I don't know, but his eyes were
and
like
he
diamonds.
has really long brown
Yes,
eyelashes
and he was tan,
too.
total opposite to Larry.
It was hard for me to pay attention.
But they were talking about a road trip that they went on.
Well, yeah. So I think Larry tells Gary about the riot and how it was scary. Yes. And yeah, they talk about some road trip to California that they took, and they were trying to think of the name of the woman that they picked up, which is that's the episode title. What's her name?
Yeah.
They couldn't. Larry kept saying names, and Gary's like, "We don't know her name. That's not her name. We never knew her name."
But Larry won't let it go. Like, he just keeps saying names over and over again.
Gary's trying to talk to him. He's like, "The police have been at the house. This is what happened." And Larry's like, "Her name is Sharon," which it is. That's the name. Gary's like, "Oh yeah, it was Sharon. You're right." Yeah. After protesting that they didn't know the name,
but it was he kind of gave like a weird smirk. Like, I kind of picked up on that. Like, wonder what's going on there.
Yeah, this Gary Larry thing. It was so hard for me to pay attention. I'm like, how is this guy so pretty right now? Even with a mullet and like a ratty baseball cap.
Yeah, his just eyes were beautiful.
Very handsome in a redneck sort of way. But yeah.
Thank goodness he doesn't look like that in real life.
Yes, he's a very nice looking man. Mm-hmm. But this is also, Gary is telling Larry that the police are so adamant about being on his case, and they're visiting, and it clues Larry into the fact that the police think that he is going to get out.
Right.
And so that kind of is giving Gary and Larry hope at the end of this episode, which is freaky kind of to think about.
Because they kind of speak like, well, when you get out.
Right. That also happens. Mm-hmm. See, I did not take good notes for this scene. I was too busy looking at him. But he talks about how Larry looks good and that he's put on some weight, which is a good thing. And Larry's like, girls don't like fat guys. And Gary's trying to talk him up and, be his pal and really say like, no, you look good, bud.
Yeah. You have hope. You have, you're going to get out and you're going to do well. And
yeah. But that's how the episode ends.
Yep.
With this note of hope for Larry, which is crazy.
Yeah. It's one of those, like, it ended and you're like, oh, I want to know what happens next. But I also, that was a lot to take in.
So much.
And so I need to, like,
I mean, it was hard. There's a lot of hard stuff, especially in this episode that, sorry if I'm like, I found it hard to talk about.
Yeah. Especially towards the end, like the last conversations that Larry and Jimmy have.
Yeah.
Like those, the graphic detail of what Larry did to the women and that kind of stuff. That was deep.
Yeah.
You need this 6 days to kind of get it out of your head and
then process it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. This was a heavy episode.
And from what we have heard, episode 5 is also going to be intense.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of that, now we have a very special treat for you guys because we talked to Natalie Kingston all about her journey with Blackbird, and she was amazing.
Kind of some insight. Yeah. She kind of gave some technical sides of things of how they shot things and some fun stories about different scenes.
Yes. She had a lot of cool stuff to talk about with us, and so we're gonna play that for you.
Yeah.
So enjoy our talk with Natalie Kingston. Thank you for being here. We have so many questions for you.
My pleasure. Yeah.
So I think just to get started, I know you probably answered this before in a lot of other interviews, so feel free to be as broad or keep it short and sweet as you want, but what first got you into being a cinematographer?
Well, let's see. It's there's a short version and a long version. I guess Yeah, I mean, it was a winding path. It wasn't a straight shot into cinematography. From early on, like when I was a kid, like 10 years old, I got my hands on my parents' video camera. It was like VHS style. And that sort of was the first seed planted. I would make like little movies, I would check out books from the library, like stage play books, and convert
Oh.
them into little films. And I just became infatuated with that. The idea of just telling a story with a camera. And of course, at that time, I didn't know what a cinematographer was. I grew up in South Louisiana, so very removed at the time from the film industry,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that idea just sort of stuck with me, and I was kind of fixated on working in film or being a filmmaker, something behind the camera. Maybe at the time I thought I was a director. I don't know, but fast forward to after college, I started working at a TV station few years after college. It was, I took other jobs after college, just trying to like find my way, trying to figure out how to get in this industry.
Yeah. Did you go to college for film or for
No,
cinematography?
so I did not. There wasn't a film program at my college at the time. The closest thing I could find was mass communications. So that was sort of like more like broadcast. It was more like broad, there were some film classes, but there were TV, like broadcasting, audio writing. So it wasn't really film focused. So yeah, I guess, I don't know, like 4 years after college, I got this job at a small TV station in South Louisiana. Um, and my first job there was in in sales, and I knew I didn't want to do that, but it was my foot in the door there.
Yeah.
If I could at least get my foot in the door, then I could figure out how to get into production. And so that's what I did. I didn't really make a sale, but a job opened up shortly after I started in production. And eventually I got this little TV show there. It was like documentary style, and I had total creative freedom of it. I would like go around and find interesting people in the area and do a little film on them, whatever they did in life, whether they were like an artist or, a crawfish farmer or whatever. And so I shot it, I edited it, I produced it, directed, did everything. But that was kind of like more or less like, I look at it kind of like as a film school, because, it was really where I learned how to operate a camera, learned how
Yeah.
to edit, really learned how to like how to craft a story. And then I started freelancing kind of on the side as a camera operator. I would do live sports, so like high school and college football, camera operating, and I really got good at operating, following the ball, and so I did that, and then eventually that sort of led to me getting on my first film set, and I worked as a camera assistant. And that's when I really understood that there was a position of a cinematographer, and I got to see like firsthand what that person did. And that's kind of when the light bulb went on. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what I want to do. So I had a clear direction at that point. And then I just pursued it from there, worked as a camera assistant for a while. And then I even went back and worked in editorial as an assistant editor. I shot like EPKs for different films. And then I started, shooting short films with my friends where I was the DP. And then got serious about just strictly DPing, and then started to focus on that and build up my work slowly but surely. And then, one job leads to another. Yeah.
And so how did you end up with Blackbird specifically?
Yeah. So Blackbird kind of came to me out of the blue. Literally, like my agent sent me the scripts, and immediately, like even based off the log line, I'm like, oh yes, this is something I want to do. And the scripts were just so riveting and just an amazing read. And I was, all in, and had my first interview was with Mikkel Roscom, the director of the first 3 episodes, and we hit it off right away, and then spoke to Dennis and the producers, and it all happened really, really fast. And then the next week I was on a plane back home to Louisiana because we shot in New Orleans. And and then we were all of a sudden in prep.
Wow. That happened real fast.
Yeah, really, really fast.
Was it nice to be back home for filming for Blackbird? And
yeah, it was, because I lived in New Orleans for a while before moving here to LA. So it's, it's home, and I got to hire a lot of my crew who I've been working with for a long time. My longtime first AC, Tweety Francis, and I have been working together over 10 years. And, he lives there, and a good friend, Matt Bell, who is my B camera operator, is there, and and a bunch of other people in the crew. So it's nice to have familiar faces, and, I have family who still live there, so it's nice to be close to them.
Right on.
We don't often see a lot of women cinematographers or DPs in the industry. Do you feel like that they're lacking the recognition, or that there's sort of a pressure to be on top of your game so you get that recognition?
I mean, I think there's definitely more of us now than ever, and the numbers are definitely growing very fast, that, than even to when I first started. It's more and more women are realizing that being a cinematographer is an option. It's not just a boys' club. I think it still is more of a boys' club. It's definitely more males. And I think there is, to some degree, for sure, women have to work harder to, we have to prove ourselves, just because we still aren't the norm, the face of what a DP looks like. And so, to some degree, there is that, having to prove ourselves, and, having to show people that we know what we're doing. But it is exciting that we are in a time where it's, an actual career option for women. It's not like totally off limits, or just, inconceivable, and so many women before me have inspired me to, to become a DP, and to know, like, okay, this is, women can do this, and you can be feminine, or you can, people can take you seriously.
So I know that a lot of your work prior to this is like documentaries, and like you said in the beginning, you did a lot of like filming real people. And do you think working in that kind of stuff kind of led to how authentic you approached this, as far as like how it's like a true story? Did that kind of affect it in any way?
I mean, I think my documentary background, because that was a lot of in the beginning, I did a lot of doc work, and that definitely informs how I light, how I approach just shooting in general, of just seeing like what's going on naturally in a space, and lighting wise, and building off of that. And that's where I always start, so, a lot of times I approach lighting of just taking away the light that's there, and shaping it, and, sculpting it that way.
Yeah.
So, I think it definitely has informed my work overall.
Yeah. It just, there's this like authenticity of like, you just kind of feel like it's a real place, and you're really sort of in it.
Yeah.
So
Good.
You were speaking about light, and I've made this comment on our podcast before. In a lot of things in today's TV movies, when it's a dark type subject, everything is so dark, and you can barely make out the actors or the details in the scene. But Blackbird is so beautifully lit. It just makes the scene so much more authentic. And so I just want to commend you on that, because it's so beautifully lit, and you don't have that struggle to kind of see where the actors are or what they're doing. You're not distracted by the darkness, but it still feels that heavy material, but it's beautifully lit. So I just want to say that you did an amazing job.
Thank you.
It was one of the first things I've noticed while watching it, was how well it's lit and shot, and the angles and everything.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the goal is to never distract. Like, I never want to distract an audience with the cinematography. It's just supposed to blend in and feel like what's naturally there.
Yeah.
But there is a lot of light, a lot of shaping of light going on. And yeah, so it's always that's always what I'm aiming to do, in every situation.
Well, you did a great job so far in the first 4 episodes.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's beautiful. It's very pleasing to watch.
Hmm.
So, what was it like filming in like this real prison that you guys were filming in? Was it hard to kind of to light it and capture
Mhm.
all the everything feels very intimate
Yeah.
and close up. Was that a solution to a problem, or was that something that you were going for originally?
Yeah, so yes, the prison was very challenging to shoot in because it's a real prison. It's not operating anymore, but it is a real location, and so that came with um, a lot of constraints. So, for example, like the fluorescent lighting fixtures
Mhm.
that are already there, they're like heavily bolted in the ceilings. They're
Mm.
outside of it. Every 2 cells, I think, has one in the middle. And I wanted to use those, so the bulbs are all changed out so they match, the same color temperature. But I couldn't go in and like isolate each fixture like I would have like on a stage. So if this was
Mm.
built, I could isolate, like fixture number 5, 6, 7, 8, turn those off, keep the 9, 10, 11 on or whatever. And so I didn't have individual control. It was just a switch. All of them were on and all of them were off. So, we had to find workarounds. And, for that, the grips made, they cut out different gels like ND gels and diffusions and solids that we could attach to the fixtures with a magnet, a really industrial magnet, so we could control them that way one by one. And that was very time consuming,
Mm.
because usually all the lights would be like on a dimmer board. And so it would just be run through, a switch or an iPad. It would be very easy. So that, is, yeah, time consuming for all the grips to go to each individual light, because it would take too long to unscrew each fixture.
Mhm.
So that's how we control those. And then, I would augment those from there with our fixtures. Shooting inside the cells, they were very small, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
and they're white walls, and which we painted it was like off white because that's what they would have been, and the outsides were like pinks and greens and blues, like pastel colors.
Mhm.
But yeah, the cells are tiny. So like, again, if we were on a stage, then we could fly out walls and just get whatever angles. So that wasn't the case there. So the art department made us a camera portal on one of the walls of each, on Larry's cell and in Jimmy's cell. And that was maybe like 4 by 6. And so we could get a camera through that was on a small jib arm,
Hmm.
which was still tricky to just maneuver in there because the sliding like bar doors, wouldn't come off. Like we'd have to slide
Right.
those open as just that small entryway.
Mm.
So, and then to remove that portal so we could get the camera in there, that took time. So we'd really have to plan that out when we would shoot that one particular angle. And then just maneuvering the camera inside the cells themselves, was really tricky. And then you mentioned the intimacy. This isn't a real plot driven series. I mean, yes, there is the plot that's going on throughout, but it's really character driven, and
Hmm.
that's what really drew me to this story in the first place. And so the goal was always to keep it very intimate and within the conversations of Jimmy and Larry, and never to feel like we're an outsider looking in, but to get very subjective with the characters and to keep the camera physically close to them many of the times, much of the time within those dialogue scenes. Yeah, so that was the idea behind that.
Yeah, that definitely comes across. I think one of the most compelling parts about the show is how just the connections between all these different pairs of characters that
Hmm.
have all of these scenes together, between Ray Liotta and Taron Egerton, or between, Paul and Taryn, or between C.O. Carter and Jimmy, you know, all these like pairs of characters and just their connections. So
yeah.
And it feels like you are a fly on the wall watching them and not removed from the situation. Like, so it feels that intimate feeling.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, that was the idea of like not, you know, not going on longer lenses and going physically further back from the actors. You know, we wanted to physically be close and with them, so you felt like what it was like being inside that small cell, or being inside the reading room in the prison, or where, or even, you know, in the larger visiting room of the prison with Big Jim, but feeling like intimate and inside that conversation, because they, you know, they're talking secretly. The guards aren't supposed to hear, you know, what they're talking about is just, you know, secretive between them. And, you know, and everything is like, you know, Jimmy's trying not to get caught. So all of this is very internal, very intimate. And
yeah, I've noticed, like, especially with Larry Hall's bits, like everything is very quiet. Like he's barely talking above a whisper sometimes, and so you really feel like you're drawn into it, and you just feel right there. Yeah.
Yeah, and we wanted to create that feeling of where you as the viewer would have that feeling of just leaning in on the edge of your seat.
Absolutely. Yeah.
because even in like the large, in like the cafeteria, when it's just them talking at a table, you feel like you're sitting at the table where you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
And it feels so large, like it's so cavernous with the empty, you know, cafeteria, but you feel like you're sitting right at the edge of the table, leaning in, listening. So
Great.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we've talked to a few people who've worked on the show. We talked with Joe Williamson, who plays C.O. Carter, and he's fantastic. And he told us about working with Taron Egerton, but mostly on the acting side, and just said, you know, he was amazing to work with. But I'm wondering about your relationship with Taron, and maybe what he brought to you as far as being on the executive producer side of things.
Taron's incredible. He's an incredible person, and obviously just such an immensely talented actor. And he is, from day one of him on set, he was just immediately connected with the camera and what was going on behind the camera, and appreciates, respects, and understands the craft of the camera, and will work, you know, with the camera and lighting, because he understands that it's a symphony, you know. So he can be, you know, pretty technical, and, you know, hit all his marks, and, you know, get into the perfect light. And he can, you know, he understands light and understands where, I'm sure he feels it, you know. I don't know, you know, I'm sure it's like he just has that appreciation for that. So it was very easy to work with him in that aspect, and in all aspects, really. You know, he would just, you know, do things, you know, if we had a complicated camera move, you know, it was definitely a collaboration with him, and, you know, hitting the certain marks or looking a certain way at the end of a camera move, or pushing whatever it was, you know, to make sure, you know, every aspect was coming together to accomplish what we needed to. So yeah, it was lovely.
Oh, that's awesome. We're big fans of Taron around here.
Yeah.
It's hard not to be.
Right. So this limited series format I wanted to talk about a little bit, because it's different from like a feature or like a regular show. And I'm wondering how you approached it, as far as like, did you work it as if it was just like a movie shoot, or did, you know, just drawn out a bit more, or like how was it different from like a typical feature?
That's kind of exactly how we approached it. I mean, obviously there are differences with TV and film, but the approach was like one big movie. And Mikkel, the first director, and I just really, you know, looked at it that way, and that was our plan, to treat it like a film. And we block shot, you know, meaning we shot everything all at once, out of order. So we didn't shoot episodes at a time, you know, which is a lot, you know, 6 1-hour episodes, you know, in one chunk. just keeping, I think that's a big difference between a feature is, in a feature you're keeping, 1.5 hour, 1.5 hour movie in your head. And this, you have so much more.
Yeah.
So it was about kind of breaking it, it was just impossible to keep all 6 episodes in your head at any given time. So it was kind of like just mentally just breaking it up, chunk by chunk and focusing on what was humanly possible to focus on, during those chunks of time, because you can't possibly prep for the whole thing at the beginning. I actually only had 5 weeks of prep in the beginning for the entire thing. Yeah, and there was a break in between. So the shoot, it was 95 days, and it was divided in half. So at that halfway mark, there was a week where we all prepped for the remaining half of the shoot, and that's where Jim McKay, who directed the 4th episode, came in, and it worked out that most of 4, 5, and 6 were in the second half. We did shoot some of 4, 5, and 6 in the first half, but not a lot. So it did sort of kind of divide itself up like that. And we wanted to save like really heavy scenes from 5 and 6 towards the end of the shoot, that were, 10-page dialogue scenes, very emotional for the actors. But that was strategic and saving those for the end. But yeah, and then from a feature, you only have the director, and TV you have a showrunner, and that aspect of it all. So the showrunner, Dennis is very obviously, he wrote all the scripts. It's a huge creative collaborator, whereas I'm used to just collaborating with the director, but it's it's 2 people now, a director and showrunner. Yeah, so that was a difference. And then you're just, you're shooting a lot more than you are in a film. There's just a lot more content that you have to get.
Right. Yeah.
When you were speaking about the collaboration, did you, in your short prep time, did you get to sit down with Dennis and the directors and kind of storyboard what everyone's vision was so that you knew going into it kind of where it was going?
Yeah, we definitely sat down and had lots of discussions. The whole series was not storyboarded. There were particular scenes, more complex scenes, that were storyboarded. But we sat down and shot listed regularly. It was impossible to shot list the whole thing beforehand. So we did, we took like the first chunk, the first 3 weeks or whatever, shot listed that. And then during the shoot, we'd meet on the weekends and shot list what was upcoming that following week. So it was a lot of work. I didn't have much time off. Yeah. So, but it was like usually Sundays, me and the director would just sit down, look at what was coming up, make a game plan, maybe even try to think ahead for the following week if anything complicated, was coming up that required special equipment or anything like that.
I wanted to ask a bit about the having multiple directors on this series, because you said, it wasn't all filmed chronologically. And so whereas there some like switching back and forth between filming things with different directors? Did they like come in for scenes that were going to be in their episodes, or how did that kind of work?
Yeah, like I said, it mostly worked out. So Jim did 4, and then it kind of worked out where Joe Chappelle, the last director, was able to do 5 and 6. So it pretty much divided up itself that way. So it worked out where, Mikkel was able to do 1, 2, and 3. And there were kind of bits and pieces that we did at the beginning. But yeah, more or less it divided up evenly that way.
Okay, cool. There's this scene in episode 1 with Jessica Roach, like on her bicycle. It's a very cool shot where like the camera kind of goes up and out as she's like riding her bike away. And I think it's a really cool scene visually. So can you tell us kind of how that happened? Like how you did that scene specifically?
So that was a number of tools, maybe 3 different tools that we used for that sequence. We use a techno crane to do the push in and then the rise up, and then the tracking shot on profile to her feet pedaling. That was a steady cam with a gyro, and my steady cam operator was sitting on a grip tricks. So operating from a grip tricks. And then maybe it was only 2 tools. Yeah, just those 2. I don't think it was 3. And
cool shot.
that was on day 95, the last day
Oh, wow.
of the shoot. But I have a story about that. So that we were supposed to get that on day 3, that whole sequence, the opening of the series, right? But day 3 there was a lot of work scheduled, and we also didn't get a great sunset. I think it was like overcast. So we just didn't get to it. So the plan was always to go back to this location, which was like an hour and a half away from New Orleans, like from where our main locations were.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kept getting pushed like throughout the schedule, because it was so hard to schedule because it was an hour and a half away. So, all of our work was in the city, and it just never made sense. We just like couldn't fit it in. And then, so it finally, we're towards the end of the shoot, and the editors are cutting, as we're shooting. And so they had an assembly of episode 1, and as a placeholder for the opening, they used some footage from some other stuff that we shot with Jessica Roach, and it worked, but it wasn't a strong, powerful opening like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It was a placeholder. That's what it was. Was that footage was never intended to be the opening. And, and some people were like, oh, it works. We can get away with it. And I never felt that it did. So I kept pushing for us to shoot it and to make it happen. And because I just knew we had to get it, because I knew it'd be a game changer if we got what we set out to do, what we intended from the beginning. And if we got the sunset and we got our crane out there and did it properly. So we were finally able to schedule it, like I said, on the last day. I think we had to go out there and shoot an insert of the tracking shot in episode 1, where Greg Kinnear goes to the cornfield and discovers a dead body. That tracking shot along the feet, that we had to do that, so we did out there, and then we did all of the bike stuff with her. Yeah, so we were able to fit it in. We had a beautiful sunset that evening, and everyone was just so excited that that we got to make it work and got what we intended.
It's definitely a powerful scene.
Yeah. I'm glad that you didn't settle.
Yeah, I knew we couldn't settle. I mean, it's the opening of the whole series. It couldn't fall flat. We had to do it right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it really sets the tone for the show, and how it's about really Jimmy's connection to Jessica Roach through Larry Hall. So it really pushed that importance on us, I think.
Great.
So it was very cool.
I'm glad you felt it. Yeah.
Yes.
It was worth it.
So what was your favorite part of just the project overall? Do you have like a favorite moment or a favorite scene that you shot, or?
Yeah, there's so many. One of my favorites you haven't seen yet is in episode 5. I can't talk too much about it because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
It's a long scene, I'll say that. Yeah, I think if I say anything, it'll spoil things. So we can maybe follow up and talk about it after.
Yeah, we'll be sure.
It was a fun one, just because so many things had to happen. There were lighting cues. It's a long camera movement. It's a really long push in. So the dolly grip, it had to be on point, and it had to be in sync with the dialogue. It had to end at the perfect time. And so that's always fun, those orchestral type, shots, and where everyone's just, has to be completely on point. yeah, and it was just very thrilling when we pulled it off and we knew we got it. Yeah, I remember Taryn was so stoked. He came up to me after the director called cut and just gave me a big hug. We felt, it was that palpable energy in the room where
Yeah.
we just felt like we just captured some magic. So that was probably like definitely up there. There's another one that you'll see soon.
Lots of big things happening in the next couple episodes.
Yeah, there's a scene in one of the cells. I'll just say that, but just the way it was blocked and the dialogue. I mean, the dialogue across the board is just fantastic. Dennis Lehane is so extremely talented, and yeah. So that scene. Let me think about one that we've already seen. Let's see. And the cornfield scene, that was one of the hottest days of the shoot. Like, in South Louisiana, and I think that was in July or August. And
yeah, who picked the timing for this?
peak humidity, just
hurricane season.
Yeah, hurricane season. Oh my God, yeah. The cornfield stuff was brutal. That was absolutely brutal. But I think one of those techno crane shots that we got when they're entering, when Greg and the sheriff are entering the cornfield, they get out the car and then we bring them in and rise up as they're walking towards the Jessica's body. That was a fun one to do. And then just the intimate dialogue scenes are just, it's just so inspiring working with such talented actors, like across the board. It's just, I just feel so lucky to be able to be the one, behind the camera capturing this all and watching their, incredible performances every day was just such a treat. And I just remember, like, on our last day, just thinking, God, as hard as this, our jobs are, and as hard as, the shoot got, it's still so rewarding, getting to work with talented people like this and tell this story, Yeah. So that was just cool to witness, what they did with each character.
Is it cool now? Are you watching it live now as it's airing, or?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, because I
cool
haven't.
to kind of see how it's all been put together and.
Yeah, I mean, I was a part of the color grade, so I saw all of the finals, and but we finished the grades in maybe that was March, April. So it's been a minute since I've seen everything. And it's still hard to be completely objective. I think that it takes a while, to be removed completely from a project, to not pick apart your own work and see all your mistakes or whatever. But no, it's been fun every Friday watching them, as they come out, as an audience member. And yeah, and I think, the editing has been fantastic. Across the board.
Yeah, it's so well put together. It feels very, the editing is very seamless, and there's a lot of like jumping back and forth between like the two different stories of like Larry and Jimmy in the beginning, and then now in the most recent episode with going back to like their childhoods and back to the present. But it doesn't feel like you're bouncing back and forth. It feels just kind of part of the story. It's really
the transitions
really well
are very smooth.
Yeah, they did a great job.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to tell us about Blackbird? I was going to ask what's next for you, but is there anything Blackbird specific that you want to talk about, or that you want to say to people who are watching the show?
Yeah, just keep watching it. I don't know. Yeah, I think 2 episodes left. So thanks to everybody who's been watching, and thanks to everyone who will binge, I guess, when they're all out. But 5 and 6 are definitely 2 of my favorite episodes. And 3 was also one of my favorites.
3 was good.
Is my favorite so far too.
Really?
I think.
3 is your favorite?
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't know, that riot scene from last night's episode was.
Did you like it?
Yeah, that was. I don't know that I breathed the entire time between the music and what was happening.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. I was stunned the whole time.
It was just cool. It was my first TV series that I shot. So it was just a really amazing opportunity to get to come in and shoot the whole thing. And, because usually a lot of times you have multiple DPs who alternate episodes. And so for my first time, it's a pretty rare thing. So I feel very fortunate to have had that opportunity to create the look and maintain it throughout the whole series. So that was really exciting, and I'm really proud of what we did all together. It was just an amazing team. I had just a phenomenal crew behind me, and I'm nothing without them, but they all are just super pro and brought their A game every single day. So I'm so grateful for that. Yeah, and then what's next? I am currently shooting some commercials and reading scripts and just waiting for the next right thing to come my way, whether that's a film or a series. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to follow Blackbird, probably, I'm sure.
For sure.
Yeah, I'm very picky too. So we'll see. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I mean, we'll be following you from here on out, I think, too.
For sure.
Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yes.
We were so excited to talk to you today.
Thank you so much.
It was so much fun. Thanks for doing the podcast. I'm excited to see who you have next.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Natalie, for that awesome conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed listening to her. It was a lot of fun to hear kind of the technical side of things and just a different point of view, because last week we had Joe kind of giving the actor side of things. So it was cool to hear the process of Natalie and how things were set up and different technical things for filming. I love that. Not everybody does, but I do. So I was kind of silent the whole time because I was so into it. I kept forgetting that I was supposed to be talking and not just listening to her speak, but I could have listened to her talk all day.
Yeah, I really like the behind the camera point of view that she gave us. It was really cool. So shout out to Natalie Kingston.
Yes,
we appreciate you so much. Thank you.
I even said after we hung up to Sarah that I would love to just be a fly on the wall while she works, just to kind of watch the process. I'm such a nerd with that. So I would love to just hold a binder and sit there, or hold a wire for a camera and just watch it all come together.
Yeah. So Natalie, if you're listening, the next time you need a personal assistant or something, hit up Kristin.
Yes.
I
nerd out about it. I could just watch filming of anything, a show, a commercial, a movie. I've been to a few sets, been very lucky and gotten to see a few things film, and I love it. Like the director, I love watching what the actors choose to do. I could talk about it all day long.
That's why you have a podcast.
Yeah. Literally, I could talk about that stuff, like camera setups and lighting and why an actor chose to do this instead of this, or I even go to a TV festival. So that's kind of shows you what I love.
That's awesome. But yeah, I think that is going to do it for this episode.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening. Again, like we said at the top of the show, we appreciate everyone listening so far. It's been amazing. If you want to talk to us, we want to hear from you.
Yes.
Follow us on our social media pages. We are at Devil Details Pod, both on Twitter and Instagram. And we look at those every single day.
Yes.
So hit us up.
And thank you guys for sharing our posts and encouraging your followers to listen to us. It means a lot. You don't even know.
Yeah, it's really touching. And so, yeah, tell us what you think of the podcast. Tell us what you think of Blackbird. Tell us what you think about all of our awesome guests that we have so far.
And we're not done with guests.
We're not done with guests. Not at all. So tell us who you think is going to be our next guest, because we have another very awesome guest for next episode. And tell us what you think of our annoying voices. Tell us everything. We want to hear everything about it, what you have to say. So check us out next week, where we will talk about episode 5 of Blackbird.
And it's supposed to be a good one, because as you heard, Natalie's got her favorite scene is in this episode 5.
Yes.
So to be on the lookout.
We'll see how that goes. We'll have to follow up with Natalie about that later. You can follow Natalie on Instagram, by the way. She is at Natalie Kingston. And I'm so sorry we didn't have time to get to Taryn Edgerton today. It just keeps happening. We keep running out of time, but maybe next time we'll get them. Thank you guys for listening. Have a good week.
Thank you. Bye.